Hello there. Again, I'm Duffy Roberts, the man behind Paul in Chains. And today I want to think about what it was like for the audience, the listeners, the recipients of Paul's letters. For example, Tychicus was present with Paul, perhaps in Rome, when he dictated his words to be delivered to the Ephesians. Well, think about it. Eventually, Tychicus takes that scroll. He travels. It may take several months before he arrives in the city of Ephesus. And when he gets into town, he starts looking for his friends, the other believers in his hometown. And he says, guess what? I have a letter from the apostle. Let's gather together and I'll read it for all of us. And everybody says, yeah, let's get together at the lecture hall of Tyrannus where we normally gather. And we'll all get together. And word spreads throughout the Christian community in the city. And that evening, they come together and they pack the place because they haven't heard from the apostle in maybe a year or two or more. And they gather together and they listen, lean forward. And Tychicus stands up in front of the crowd. He opens up the parchment and he begins to read it. And as he read it, those who remember Paul can kind of hear the cadence in his voice. They can almost picture him standing in front of them himself. Now, listen, this is the first time these people have ever heard these words. That's why I try to help people before we begin, to cleanse their minds as if they've never heard these words, even though some of them may be very familiar because we've been in churches, we've listened to sermons, we've read the book ourselves. But for his earliest listeners, it wasn't there. And they didn't have copies in front of them. So that's the other reason why I ask my audience to close their Bibles, put it away, open their ears and their eyes so that they can receive whatever is presented to them. And the other thing, when Tychicus read this, he didn't say, okay, this week we're going to read chapter 2, verse 10. And then he starts expanding how we are the workmanship of God, created for good works, and then set it up and then expand on that. Nobody was sermonizing. Nobody was dissecting. Nobody was expounding these words. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do. It's a great thing to do. Pastors, teachers do an excellent job of breaking down Paul's letters into its component thoughts and pieces, and there's rich wisdom and knowledge that comes through all of that. But when Tychicus stood up to read the letter, he started at chapter 1, verse 1, and read it all the way to chapter 6, verse 24. Only there were no chapters, there were no verses. It was just a letter. There were no little numbers dividing it up into pieces. And so what people listened to was Paul's flow of thought as he conveyed his heart. And they took it in as a whole. And that's something that's, I believe, is missing in today's churches and Christian gatherings. Oh, we may look with a microscope at God's word. It's not a bad thing to do. It's great. But when do we step back and take in the whole of what it says and just abide in it, not analyze every little thing, but just take in what the Spirit is conveying from one man's heart to a gathering who want to know the same Jesus, the same Christ that Paul was so passionate about. And that's why Paul in Chains is a unique experience. Please check out my website. If you can extend an invitation for me to come present this for you, I'd love to do it. Thank you. La 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 la.